You're 42. A bullet in the hip outside Kiev ended your war on the Eastern Front. The doctors patch you up and hand down a verdict. You'll never march 20 miles again. So instead of a rifle pit in Russia, they give you a fence, a watchtower, and 4,000 British and American airmen who spend every waking hour trying to walk through you and vanish into the trees. You think this is the safe posting. You think you got lucky. You have no idea that in 14 months you'll be standing close enough to 50 murders to smell them, without ever pulling a trigger yourself. And the not pulling won't feel like innocence. It'll feel like guilt with nowhere to confess it. It's 1942. You're a Gefreiter guarding a Luftwaffe-run camp deep in the pine forests of Lower Silesia, and almost nobody standing this wire chose to be here. Reservists past 50, teenagers who failed the fitness exam for the front, men patched back together like you, parked somewhere they can still hold a rifle without being trusted to run with one. Your commandant reminds you of the Geneva Convention, often enough that the rules stop sounding like law and start sounding like habit. Prisoners are to be treated fairly, and for now, mostly, they are. The prisoners call you goon. Not with hatred, almost with affection. The way you'd name a stray dog that keeps showing up at the same hour every day. You don't hate them either. Nobody tells you that going in, that you'll spend more hours near these men than you ever spent near your own platoon in Russia. And it's hard to keep hatred warm for a face you see every single morning. Months pass. You learn the compound the way you'd learn a second home. You learn which prisoners are trouble and which ones just want the war to end quietly. Small things start catching your eye. A patch of ground that looks disturbed. A card game that breaks up too fast when you walk past. You report what you see. It gets filed with 100 other hunches because suspicion isn't evidence, and nobody wants to be the officer who shut down a camp over a feeling and turned out to be wrong. By 18 months in, you've been made an unteroffizier, given a section of wire and the men who walk it. And word has come down that this particular camp was built to hold habitual escapees, men who'd already tried and failed everywhere else. The theory was that keeping your worst troublemakers together would make them easier to watch. It did the opposite. It built them a university. You start hearing rumors of tunnels. You never find one. Somehow, whatever you're looking for is never where you look. You're not on duty the night it happens, but you feel it before you hear it. A stillness in the camp that isn't right. Guards moving faster than usual. A search beginning before anyone's told you why. Then the number reaches you, and it stops you cold. 76 officers. Gone through a tunnel 3 feet under the wire, past the towers, past the searchlights, out into a countryside they can barely navigate on false papers and coats stitched from converted uniforms. For a week, you don't sleep in a bed. Every guard for 100 miles is pulled into the search, checking papers on freezing rail platforms at 3 in the morning. One by one, the recaptures start coming in. Only 3 men ever make it all the way home. You feel something close to pride the first few times you hear one's been caught. Then Berlin sends its answer for what happens next. The pride curdles into something you don't have a word for yet. Hitler wants every one of them shot. Himmler talks him down to just over half. You don't pull a trigger. Almost nobody wearing your uniform does. The Gestapo takes the recaptured men in small groups, drives them out to quiet roadsides in the name of transfer, and shoots them there, in direct violation of the same convention your commandant once treated as gospel. 50 men. Officers whose faces you knew from 3 years of walking the same compound, whose names you'd learned without meaning to. The official record says they were shot resisting capture. Everyone on both sides of the wire knows exactly what that phrase means when it happens to 50 men inside 2 weeks. You keep standing your post because refusing an order now doesn't bring any of them back. It just puts your own name on a different kind of list. You tell yourself the distance between you and the Gestapo car is enough. Most nights, you almost believe it. The camp doesn't stop being a camp. American bomber crews start outnumbering the British flyers who built the tunnel that killed 50 men. Rations shrink on both sides of the wire, and the Red Cross parcels become the only food anyone can count on. Guards get pulled for the collapsing front, one by one, and the men left behind are older and sicker than the year before. You're past 40, and somehow one of the younger men left standing. Then, in January of 1945, with the Soviet army 20 miles out and closing, the order arrives. Evacuate west, on foot, immediately. You march out into one of the coldest winters of the century, beside thousands of men you've spent 3 years watching through a fence. Now you're walking next to them on an open road while both sides freeze and starve together. And the line between guard and prisoner has never felt thinner. Men on both sides drop in the snow. You've stopped being sure whose job it is to help them back up. Plenty of prisoners could overpower guards as broken down as you now and simply walk off into the chaos. Almost none do. A known captor, however exhausted, feels safer than a collapsing continent with no lines left on the map. That single fact tells you more about what's coming than any order out of Berlin ever did. By spring, American tanks roll up on a column that's barely a formation anymore, and you raise your hands. So does everyone else still wearing your uniform. The men you guarded for 3 years are free within minutes. A few of them shake your hand on the way past. One spits at your boots. Most just walk by like you were never really the point. Like the wire was the enemy all along, and you were only ever furniture standing next to it. You become a prisoner yourself that same afternoon. And for the first time in 3 years, you understand from the inside exactly what you spent all that time guarding people from feeling. The war ends 2 weeks later. You spend the next year in an Allied holding camp answering questions about what you saw and what you knew. While investigators hunt down the Gestapo men who actually pulled the triggers on the 50, a handful of them will hang for it. You're not one of them. You never held the gun, and the tribunal draws its line at the trigger, not at the wire. But you carry the arithmetic home with you anyway. 50 men. 3 who made it, 73 who never got further than a roadside in Silesia. You go home to a country in ruins, to a job that no longer exists, to a uniform that means nothing now, except a question people are too polite to ask you out loud. You spent 3 years standing at a fence, telling yourself it made you safe from what the war really was. It didn't. It just put you close enough to watch.